Welcome back to CyHawk Talk here on a Wednesday, getting ready for that 72nd meeting between Iowa and Iowa State this Saturday at 11 a.m. I'm going to be in Ben's territory. I'm going to be in Ames for that game. Ben's going to be showing me the ropes, even though I have been to Jack Trice multiple times already for a game. Ben, first CyHawk game, you excited?
I can't wait. It's Matt Campbell pointed it out, like just being in this atmosphere is awesome. You see the bed sheets on all the fraternity houses, which have a lot of interesting messages on them that we won't repeat on Cyhawk Talk, and you really see a lot of energy and you feel the buzz of a Cyhawk week.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. I believe this is my third Cyhawk game, and they've all been really good ones. The first one was in Jack Trice. Got to watch Iowa win there. Jazzy and Patterson had a nice long run. Got tracked down from behind right at the goal line. Didn't score on it, but he was close. And then Sebastian Castro had a big interception in that game as well. And then obviously last year Kyle Conrarty writes his name in the Cyhawk history books with his game-winning kick and. Um, Maybe something we can both chat about here a little bit. But this game kind of sets the tone for both teams going into the rest of the season. If you look at the trajectories of both seasons last year, Iowa was coming in talking about college football playoff aspirations, and then they lose the Cyhawk game. That doesn't necessarily eliminate them from playoff contention, but it kind of took the wind out of their sails. And then we saw how things went. They went and got uh, crushed in Ohio Stadium against Ohio State, and then lost a bad game to Michigan State, and you kind of look back and you're like, yeah, that Cyhawk game was kind of the game that they needed to win to really solidify. Yeah, we can do this. We're the playoff team that we thought we were coming into the year, and instead it was almost like Iowa State stole that confidence, stole that energy, and then became a near playoff team last year. And Coach Campbell kind of got into this at his press conference this week. Ben, you sent me that quote earlier. Is that something that you get the sense of as well, even though you didn't get to necessarily see last year's game?
Absolutely. That's such a good observation, Ethan, because in previous years, with a 14 playoff, it did feel like you needed to win Cyhawk to go reach the college football playoff and be one of those top four teams at the end of the year. Now, from Iowa State's perspective, they're already 1-0 in the Big 12. So theoretically, on paper, a Cyhawk loss doesn't really hurt them all that much in terms of their quest to get to the college football playoff through the Big 12 championship. But it does because of all the psychological momentum aspects of this game. It means so much to these players who so many of them are in state. If Iowa State's able to pass this test, you look at their resume through the first 3 games of the season and put it up there with any college football team in the country. If Iowa passes this test, Mark Gronowski probably did something right, and they're forgetting about the opening jitters against Albany, and Iowa's suddenly looking and feeling so much different. So yeah, it does mean a lot in terms of what these teams are trying to accomplish at the end of the season.
Also really cool. A lot of Iowans playing in this game. I think Coach Wallace told us today on Zoom that there are around 90 players or 60 high schools and about 90 players from the state of Iowa represented in this game. And 24 of the players on the two deeps for the two schools combined are from the state of Iowa. So a lot of local interest and a lot of big things happening on Saturday is what I'll say, and we'll get into some of those other historical things that might come into play later on in the show.
We asked Rocco Becht what he knew about Cyhawk when he was growing up in Florida. He said, nothing. So, yeah, a lot of Iowa kids and a lot of Florida kids who have quickly learned the value of this game.
Speaking of Rocco Becht, we'll go ahead and get into my first takeaway, and I think the number one thing I'm looking for, I guess not a takeaway, but a thing I'm looking at, and that's Rocco Becht and how Iowa's going to slow down. Perhaps the hottest quarterback in the country. He had a head start. Not that the rainy, nasty conditions at Aviva Stadium necessarily welcomed him kindly into the 2025 college football season. But Rocco Becht is kind of on fire right now. One incompletion last week, if I'm not mistaken, uh, led his team to a massive beatdown of a team that I thought was capable of pulling an upset. So I'm really keenly interested in seeing how Iowa can slow Rocco down because Rocco was kind of the difference maker last year. And I wrote a story last year that the perception of him going into last year's CyHawk game showed his growth. And I probably could have written the exact same story again. You look back, his first year starting, his second game as a starter was the CyHawk game. There was that gambling situation that was kind of hanging over the Iowa State and Iowa programs. And he kind of came in and was an immediate superstar. I was an immediate believer in the guy. And then last year, you just look at the way, compare and contrast the way that the coaches were talking about Rocco going into that game, and it's like this guy has gone from virtually an unknown in a quarterback battle with App State quarterback J.J. Cole for the Cyclones to replace Hunter Deckers, and then last year it's like, oh, this guy he plays like a veteran. He's confident. They believe in him. Just look at the play calling, all this stuff, and it's like that's completely different than what it was a year ago. And then now it's like he's all that and then some again. And so Rocco is kind of the key. He had his way with Iowa in critical parts of last year's game, led the set up the game winning kick, and it'll be interesting to see if this young secondary can slow down a dark horse Heisman candidate at this point.
It absolutely feels like, Rocco Becht is probably the guy keeping Iowa State's defensive coordinators, defensive players, fans up at night this week. I think that's who they're probably thinking of.
Yeah, and I mean, we asked him about like how do you slow down Rocco or what do you see in Rocco, and he's like a guy who's got a lot of poise and a lot of confidence, and like that's what you want out of a quarterback, and I think that might be what Mark was lacking a little bit last Saturday, poise and confidence. So Rocco's got it; he's got it in spades.
Do you think any of that poise and confidence from Gronowski is going to return this week?
He's handled everything. I believe I said this on Monday when we did our Monday rewind. But he's handled everything since he walked off the field on Saturday really, really well. He's an experienced guy. You really get the sense that he knows what he's doing. Um, and so I have reason to believe that that was probably going to be an anomaly. If you're looking at a 11, 12, 13 game season for Mark Gronowski, it's going to be the anomaly that like, oh yeah, what happened? What was up with that U Albany game? That was so weird. Um, Certainly, that might be what I project, but I'm still keenly looking at how he handles and how he rebounds. He's had poor performances in his past at South Dakota State. We maybe didn't focus on it during the offseason when we were just kind of talking about how good of a quarterback Iowa got, but he's had some down performances and he's been able to rebound. And so I believe that he's going to be a guy that can walk into Jack Trice and operate an offense like we thought he was going to last week. Uh, I do think that he would have got there last week if he hadn't gone down with cramping as well, which is exactly why I said, don't overreact to last week because it was a game that just got away from the offense and you didn't lose the game. You still won by 34 or 27 and the ground game was going. So I think that the jitters will be gone, but that'll be definitely something I'm looking at for the first quarter.
And we asked Matt Campbell about Gronowski and what he saw on tape. And Campbell, of course, watched a lot more Gronowski tape than just the 3 quarters he played on Saturday. Campbell pointed to his strong track record at South Dakota, the intangibles he has, the problems he presents in the running game, as a leader, all of those kinds of things. Matt Campbell's not watching one Iowa tape and thinking this guy can't throw. I think Campbell has a lot of respect for what Gronowski brings.
Well, I certainly think that Iowa State fans took a lot of confidence away from what they saw out of Gronowski last week, and I don't think it's unfair to be like, well, yeah, if he does that again, we're going to win by a lot. I think, yeah, if that does happen again, it's going to be a pretty long day for Iowa fans, and it's going to be a pretty fun day for Iowa State fans. Like the tailgates after the game are going to be lit, as the kids say.
You're young enough to say that. You can get away with that still.
26 last week. I don't know. I'm losing it. And
What's your
then
last takeaway? What's your last thing you're looking for?
looking at the last one, as I mentioned, there's some history out there for both teams, both programs, both coaches, and that's the last thing I'm looking at is, both these guys are on milestone watch. Kirk Ferentz maybe a little bit bigger of a milestone. If he wins the game, it's going to be win 206. He's the all-time winningest coach in the Big Ten at that point. Sole possession of it. He is one of the winningest coaches in the Big Ten, tied with Woody Hayes of Ohio State at 205, but wins this game and he'll be alone at the mountaintop. And then Matt Campbell, This would be the first time he's ever led Iowa State to a win over Iowa at home if he pulls off the win. I was almost said upset there. It's gonna be upset if Iowa wins. But if he pulls it off in Jack Trice, and then also as you pointed out as we were getting ready to start recording here, it would be the first time he's had two straight wins in the CyHawk game. So I think that when you looked at maybe the knock on Matt Campbell early on in his Iowa State tenure, it was he didn't have any wins against Iowa, and now pretty much the only thing you can say is he hasn't beat Iowa at home. So that's the last thing I'm looking at in this matchup is which coach can get to that milestone.
Yeah, when you think about what Matt Campbell's accomplished in 10 years at Iowa State, he's checked off a lot of these bucket list things. But beating Iowa at home and winning a Big 12 championship are kind of two of the things that he's still looking for and still looking to accomplish. And we'll see if it gets there on Saturday. I think if it is going to happen, if Matt Campbell is going to start a little Cyhawk winning streak, Iowa State's linebackers are going to have to shut down this Iowa running game. That's my first thing I'm looking for when I thought about how this game is going to go. And that comes into stopping Gronowski as a runner, and it goes into stopping this deep Iowa backfield that seemingly hasn't taken a hit when the starter exits the game. Any idea on if he'll be back, on if Moulton will play in this game?
Moulton is out. That Barron said that right away. So all three of the Iowa injured Hawkeyes will miss. Reese Vanders, he's going to miss about a month. So he was going to be out. Bryce George, an offensive lineman, transfer from Ferris State, went down in warmups on Saturday. He's also going to be gone, and then Kamari will miss the SIAC game.
Gotcha. Well, I think so much of that burden is going to come down on Iowa State's linebackers because I do think that Iowa probably has an advantage, in the trenches. Iowa State plays a three-man front. I think there's going to be a lot of push from the Hawkeye side to the Cyclone side on both sides of the ball. So we'll see if these linebackers can kind of fill some of those gaps, get downhill, and stop the running attack for Iowa.
The trenches are going to be a point of emphasis in this game, but another thing, especially when you look at the Cyhawk game, a game decided by an average of 5 points, special teams are going to play a massive role, and that's something you're looking at in this one. Obviously, Kyle Conrarty with the big boot last week, Drew Stevens with a career long of his own. So we got two teams that are pretty well established at on the special teams. You go ahead and take it away and explain what you're looking at in particular on special teams.
That's it. I'm looking for who makes the big special teams play. With so many of these Cy-Hawk matchups, it does feel like it comes down to, some sort of crazy or special teams big mistake. It's going to be crazy. It's, who does that? Maybe Kyle Conradi goes out there and breaks his own Jack Trice record and hits a 64-yarder. Iowa State's had some awesome returns last week from Aiden Flora in the return game. And so far, they've kind of avoided the big special teams mistake that could easily cost a game in what you said is a 5-point game normally, a rivalry decided just by the slimmest of margins. I've fallen and I can't
Yeah,
get up.
you're down. You're down. We need to get Life Alert sponsored on the show so you can get back up off of your perch here. It's funny though. You mentioned the big special teams mistake, and that wasn't where my mind was at all. But I'm reminded from my days of being a student at the University of Nebraska, Matt Campbell was on his way to his first Cyhawk victory, and then there was that huge blunder on the punt return where the Iowa State blocker like ran into his own return man, and then the ball bounced off his back. Iowa was able to recover and kick a walk-off field goal, I believe. And so that is absolutely something I didn't consider. So I thank you for bringing that up because you just get so used to special teams excellence that you forget about how impactful it can be when it's not excellent.
There's no doubt about it. Now, there's one area I think the Cyclones do have an advantage, and that's going to be Iowa State's tight ends against Iowa's linebackers. And, that's my third thing I'm looking for. I think the Cyclones want to win games with their tight ends this season. They want to primarily run through Benjamin Bramer, Gabe Burkle, those talented tight ends who have proven themselves as capable pass catchers. And I think they're going to try and win a lot of games like that this season. And I think this matchup specifically favors that strategy with the linebackers that Iowa has lost to the NFL the last year. So I don't know. I don't think UAlbany had a 6'7" tight end that they could throw the ball to twice on the goal line and say, Benjamin Bramer, go up there and make a catch. I think that's going to be something that the Hawkeyes are going to have to deal with. Oh no, this is no longer an FCS opponent. This is the real deal.
You're so sharp, Ben, that your own little paper copy, your paper clone can't handle the intelligence you're spitting right now. Because that's absolutely something that we asked the Iowa guys about. It's like, how do you handle these two tight ends? And it's certainly something that they're paying attention to, something that they're on alert about. And Coach Ferentz, the leader of tight end U, to a lot of people, went out and said, both these guys are probably going to have NFL opportunities whenever they make that decision. And just a personal anecdote, I'm still a little irritated that Matt Rule didn't decide to keep Benjamin Brahmer in that recruiting class, because he was committed to Nebraska first, and then that coaching change happened from Frost to Mickey Joseph to Matt Rule, and he just got caught up in the wash and ended up at Iowa State. And man, that's been all the better for Iowa State, because he is a great tight end.
Yeah, if only he could have foreseen what a 6'7" tight end letting that guy go could
Yeah,
be. Who could have seen it coming?
yeah, who could have seen that coming, really? But we'll go ahead and get into what we see coming on Sunday for Sunday's headlines today, right after this.
He basically just said, "Do you want to kick it?" And I'm like, "Of course." And he's just like, "F it, let's kick it."
He said that.
F it,
He
or
did.
was it something different?
What's that?
Was it F it, or was it something different?
I don't know if I should say it.
And we're back here on CyHawk Talk, talking Sunday's headlines today. And I'll just go ahead and launch right into my first headline, and that's "Take That for Data." If you remember, David Fizdale, the Grizzlies head coach, Memphis Grizzlies head coach, said that after a game. And I think that the sense from the Iowa media gallery was, we didn't really get a data point. We get 12 data points in a year, and those are the games, right? We're not out at practice. We don't get to see what's going on in practice. So really all the data we get is what you see on game day in the game. And we're looking like, hey, we didn't really get much from that game. It was such a weird game. What do we ask about on Tuesday? And so, we're just asking the CyHawk questions, and it's like, we can't take too much away from what Mark did, so we can't really take too much away from what the running game did, and we can't really take too much away from the defense because they were playing an FCS opponent. So I think we're finally going to get some real data on this team. We're finally going to figure out what we're dealing with from these Hawkeyes, what we're dealing with from Mark Gronowski, the running back room. I feel like all of those are going to go from clearly cloudy, as Coach Ferentz says, to crystal clear. And that's why I think that this is going to be a big weekend for the data.
I would say the advantage there's nothing on film. Iowa State doesn't have much to go off of either.
There was one, I believe it was Jonah Krell from the Quad Cities asked Ferentz about that, and he didn't really play ball with that question. I think he's pretty well aware that Campbell can go back and look at what Iowa wanted to do in years past to figure out what they're going to think about trying to do this year. But like I said earlier, you can have all the scouting taken care of, but this is really going to come down to a game of special teams and a game in the trenches, which is why my number 2 headline is going to be trench warfare. Iowa State has their big nose tackle, Dom Orange, who, he's a big guy, as Coach Ferentz said, but he doesn't play like he's, a real hefty guy. He moves like he's just a disruptor in the middle of that defensive line. And Iowa, obviously known for its offensive line as well, paving some huge holes from the running game. That's probably why they ran for 310 yards against UAlbany. So that's going to be where the battle, the game is won and lost, is in the trenches. I think that might lean a little heavy Iowa's way because of the front that the Iowa State Cyclones run, but we'll see how it ends up. Regardless of who wins, it'll have been trench warfare. And then to round it out, hero ball. I think this is going to come down to the play of the two quarterbacks. Like I said, Mark Gronowski, if he plays like he did against UAlbany, it's not going to be a very good game for the Hawkeyes. If he plays well, then the Hawkeyes have their shot to knock off the number 6 Cyclones. And if Rocco Becht does his thing, he could very well make it a case of, it doesn't really matter what Mark does. Mark could play great as well, but if Rocco plays better, Iowa State could cruise to a victory. So it's going to come down to the quarterbacks, and it's going to come down to a little bit of, caping up and being that hero for your team.
Yeah, I can't beat the Fizdale reference. I love that quote. But I'll throw out my first headline: special teams, special players. And if you get that reference, you're definitely of Ethan and my generation. But I do think that this game comes down to some sort of play on special teams, like we talked about. Whether it's a long field goal, like we saw last year, or in the punting game, which has been so critical to these two teams. So I can't wait to see what special teams moment kind of defines this game. And I would go next to CyHawk stays home. I joke that there's an away field advantage in this rivalry lately. I think 7 years in a row, the visiting team has won CyHawk, which is just so rare in any college football game. 7 years feels like a large enough sample size. Matt Campbell kind of didn't have any idea like how that could be. He said, I mean, it's a fact, so there must be something there. Maybe the team that has to live in this Cyhawk frenzied environment for an entire week has a little bit more pressure or feels a little bit more, pressure to go out and do something. So maybe finally the home team gets a little home field advantage. And I think the Cyhawk trophy stays home. That means Cyclone fans, I'm picking the Cyclones. And it's going to come down to Rocco Becht. My headline is give him the rock. ROCC. You hear it so much with basketball players. Who wants the ball in the final seconds to hit the game-winning shot? Give me the rock. I know Rocco Becht is one of those players for the Cyclones, and he's proven it. He proved it in Dublin, Ireland against Kansas State. He proved it 5 times last year as the Cyclones were 5-1 in one-score games. And I just think there's a confidence and a poise about this entire offense when Rocco Becht gets the ball late. And he did it with 30-some seconds left last year. If the Cyclones give him more time than that, he might even make it a little bit easier this time around. So I think Rocco Becht is going to factor in with some sort of late game drive as this rivalry is so close, like you pointed out earlier.
Well, those will wrap up our Sunday's headlines today. We'll see who's wearing the brown paper bag on their head next week. Hopefully it's Ben. But that'll do it for CyHawk Talk. We'll be back on Sunday for a Sunday rewind. Thanks for watching.